Hi, we are now only 15 sutras away from completing the sutras that are designated for the operation of the grammar. And that's pretty exciting. And it also means that it's a really good time to go back, ideally to the beginning, and do one or two things. Um, Especially if you have an interest in gaining what feels to you, and I would advocate is just what it feels like, uh, knowledge of the grammar. That is, a working knowledge of the grammar, which is what I think of as meaning learning the grammar. I'll have a lot more to say about that in a few days. So in any case, this would be a great time to go back and start reciting the sutras. Try use whatever resource you want. Try to list the sutras that we've covered so far, and don't stress about memorizing them. But if you do recite them uh, consistently, at the very least, they will become very familiar. So, as we next enter into the just thrillingly interesting and often complex Sandhi Sutras, it will be much more intuitive uh, to understand uh, the inner workings of each of those sutras. I'd suggest you go back and start trying to, you don't have to try, just recite them, read them, recite them, definitely including the Akshara Samamnaya. And you might consider going back and watching the early sutras, the early videos that uh, we have, because a lot of material in those videos was intended to prepare the way for integrating the sutras we've done by now. So that will all make a lot more sense. Um, so yeah, so this is a fun moment, and it's also kind of inherently appropriate because, as with others, the understanding of today's sutra is relies on a considerable amount of what I just mentioned. So 132, or 3 in Siddhanta Comedy, is an interesting sutra in many ways. It is what I consider a foundational sutra, meaning it's a fundamentally important concept. But curiously, it has very little direct application. So instead of being all mysterious, I'll try to explain all that. So 132, Upadeshe Janunasika It. Upadeshe Janunasika It. So if we break up the sandhis, we have Upadeshe in an Upadesha, Ach, as we know, and we will go back and think about this again in a moment, otherwise known to us as vowels. So anunasikaha, we also know what that is. Mukhanasika vachanonunasikaha. So that's modifying ach in this case. So a nasally pronounced vowel, ach anunasikaha, upadeshe, occurring in an upadesha, it, gets the name it. Now, it is a concept that we have been using since the very, very first sutra in the Akshara Samamnaya, a-i-un, a-i-un. So, if you recall, a-i-un is the first sutra, and thanks to it, we can already begin to make some pratyahara, because as you remember and as you know, the pratyahara that are so crucial to the grammar are described by the sutra 1171, adirantyena saheta, adirantyena saheta, the first along with the final it. The first along with the final it. So we have been puttering along all this time, just kind of nodding our heads and saying, yes, the n, the consonant that ends, and I apologize because I realize now that I kept using the term hull, which doesn't really make a lot of sense until you complete the Akshara Samamnaya and realize that hull is a pratyahara for all of the consonants. So, adirantyena saheta, the first along with the final it. So all of the its that we were originally acquainted with are final consonants, such as iun, reluk, aong, iouch, hayavarat, lan. Now, so by adirantyena saheta, we know that we can form pratyaharas out of all sorts of things. We get ach, the vowels, we get e, we get ik, we get aich, we get h, all sorts of things. So how does Upadesha Janunasika it come into play? Well, first thing is, what is an Upadesha? And we'll come back to that in a moment. But just to make life simple, we'll say sutras are Upadeshas. So a Anunasika ach, a nasally pronounced vowel occurring in an Upadesha, gets the name it. Now, curiously enough, none of the things that we've been calling it, the k, n, ch, t, n of the the early sutras, in fact, all of the Akshara Samamnaya sutras, none of those are vowels, much less nasally pronounced. So how the heck did they become it? Well, we'll find out next sutra. But what we did find out is, why did we make kind of a point out of the fact that the of lun, has come to be understood as nasally pronounced. The of lun is nasally pronounced. When I make it so circumspect, it's because we don't know that Panini said it was nasally pronounced, but that's a whole other story. Suffice it to say that the wise people have decided that it ought to be, it would be happier, the grammar would be happier. So that means that this nasally pronounced of lun that we made a little bit of a point out of originally is it. It's it, which means that the a pratyahara is created by the first one, and in this case it's hayavarat lan. If you take ra, the letters in between are pratyaharas, are it, or the ta is it, you get ra la, ra la. The of la is nasally pronounced. So by today's sutra, Upadesha Janunasika it, that of lan is it. So if you say ra, or in fact, if you say ra, if it's efficacious, we understand that to be a pratyahara of and l. And l. Pratyahara formed from the first, which is the of ra, to the final it. In this case, That is the nasally pronounced of lung. So, that pretty much brings us up to date in terms of today's sutra. The only other little tidbit is why is it ach? Why does it say nasally pronounced ach? Well, there's a very pragmatic reason for that, or at least as understood in the consensus of commentaries, I guess you would say. That's to prevent a nasally pronounced consonant or hull which occurs in a sutra from being considered automatically it, and that would be just very chaotic, and that would be a mistake. So far so good. Now, only remaining question is, what exactly is Upadesha? Now, that's a kind of a thing, because there doesn't seem to be any clear definition of Upadesha in the grammar. And so different commenters from Bhattoji Dikshita, I don't know what Patanjali said, onward are sort of, have ways of humming and hawing. They say it's an instruction, or the first instruction, or a grammatical term or something. So what's the real mystery to me is that Prabhakara Shastri, as is his wont, provided me with a definition of Upadesha, but without any source. So, and I've never been able to find a source for it. I've looked a lot of places. I just don't know. But it's one of those things that I've just gotten fond of. So I am passing it along. And it certainly won't, lead anybody astray if we hold on to it, because it starts right off with sutras. So here is the I don't know if you could call it a paribhasha. It is what it is. Maybe a Vartika someplace. I have no idea. Anyway, here it is. Could be a Vartika by somebody late that I just don't know, because there are lots of those floating around. Anyway, Dhatu Sutra Gana Unadi Vakyalinganushasana Agama Pratyaya Deshaha Upadesha Prakirtitaha. Dhatu Sutra Gana Unadi Vakyalinganushasana Agama Pratyaya Adeshaha Upadesha Prakirtitaha. So, Upadesha Prakirtitaha are called Upadeshas. So, dhatus, verbs, sutras, gana, lists that we'll become more familiar with later, especially with verbs. But there are particular ganas, lists of different kinds, which are associated from the beginning, apparently, with the grammar. Unadi, I'm not quite sure of. Una, etc. Vakya, I think, refers to Vartikas. Linganushasanam, that refers to pertaining to gender. Agama pratyaya adeshaha augments endings and substitutions. All of these are considered Upadesha. So that's what we've got on that topic. Luckily, we don't really need to think much further than sutras. So thank you. That's it. And we will kind of wrap up part of the mystery tomorrow.